Okay, so, there he is again. There's two of us up here again. This time we're talking about RIDE and the open front-end protocols. But this time I think I'm going to let Nick do the talking, since he's done the work. And I'll stand to one side until later. Nick, tell us about open front-ends.
Okay. Yeah, I've done the work for this incarnation of RIDE, which has been there for 2 or 3 years. So if you see it break, I'm the one to curse. I'm afraid I'm not prepared with slides, so it's going to be all demos with all the risks that come with that. And yeah, there's going to be quite a lot of. There's going to be an element of improvisation in that. So RIDE stands for Remote Integrated Development Environment, and it is what it says. It's a tool that connects to an interpreter running potentially on a different box. Regardless of operating system, you should be able to connect from any of them to any other. When you start it, you're presented with this screen, which has a lot of controls for different ways to connect to the other computer. And you have profiles here in this list. You can create a couple of them. You can clone existing ones, delete them. And there are 3 basic ways in which you can establish a connection, either connect to an interpreter, possibly using SSL and validating the SSL parameters, or you can start an interpreter, including starting one over SSH on a remote machine. This select box here is populated with the existing installed interpreters on the computer you're connecting to. It also knows which ones are not supported. You can pass arguments, environment variables. The most popular ones to tweak are, for instance, max was path if you're not using the standard one. Or you can have the interpreter connect to your RIDE. If you pass the appropriate environment variable for that, which is RIDE init equals connect : hostname : port. So yeah, but yeah, we're not going to do that. So I'll just start a local interpreter. You have the session. Basically all the tools an APL developer would expect. You can type things like IOTA 100, and note that you can type IOTA by typing backquote and then the letter I. And if you forget which letter you have to type, you can also type double backquote and start typing some name for the squiggle you're after. Yeah, okay. You can type things like 2 + 2. You can edit. You can edit functions. You can type. I'm glad you noticed. You can trace. I'll explain that in a moment. You can trace and you can edit and change the code and press escape and continue tracing like any APL developer expects. You can set breakpoints yeah, like that, and use these buttons. I'm not sure what all of them do, but older people than me know. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm improvising a little, so I have to look at my notes. Right. You've got the language bar and all the tooltips. By the way, I'm showing RIDE 4 here because you already saw RIDE 3 in some of the previous presentations, and including you saw it crash. But I would like to show now what the status quo is with RIDE 4, and which is not yet released, and Morten will later talk about the future. Because as you know from yesterday, I'll be leaving in a couple of months. I personally don't use this edit. I prefer to use Vim. And since I'm biased towards that, I've also added an option in RIDE to use other editors, not necessarily Vim in particular. So if I close this and start it again with an, I hope you can see that, with an environment variable RIDE underscore editor. Let's say I'll set it to Emacs. When I do the same thing again and I edit a function, I should get a nice editor, Emacs. It didn't understand the line breaks, I think, in this case. But if I type something here and save and exit, quad CR, is that large enough? Probably not. Quad CR of F should give you whatever I typed there. Right. So I'll set it back to nothing. It's good to know that you can go back in the history of what you typed with Control-Shift backspace. And with Control-Shift Enter, you can go forward. When you edit functions or classes or any other object, you can localize. Actually, if it's a tradfun, it makes sense to localize variables. A nice shortcut is Control-Up, so you don't have to type this thing by hand. You just press Control-Up on the variable name and it toggles it. It has all sorts of clever stuff here, like you type something like this and you press Enter here and it completes it with the end keyword. You've got folding and stuff. Right. So I would like to use something as an example here. Oh, but before that, let me explain what I did to have 2 + 2 be 5. So in my environment, I set this variable, RIDE.js, which means load this additional JavaScript file after you, what happened? After you load RIDE. So if I edit that file, you can see that it does something there which checks for 4 and replaces it with 5. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is you can extend the editor if you yeah, to do things for you. Something nice about APL, which I personally haven't seen in other languages, is this complete integration with the development environment. And something I like about it is like you can have an array which you can open here, and when you modify it, it updates automatically. So that has potential for abuse. You can do small animations there, and you can put a Boolean matrix there, and like the game of life, and it will feel like it's a real video. So I've prepared some code. It's my tribute to the Stormwind simulator, which is quite impressive. So I'll create a function. I'm not going to explain how it all works, but I'm just going to show it. I hope it works. Well, this is in a TradFun. Oh, yes. Oops. It overwrote itself. Anyway. Thank you. So it's fast enough to render that. By the way, that's Braille. Every Braille character is a 4x2 matrix of dots. So that can be abused to draw little pixels. That's the, the Mandelbrot set. This is the game of life, Sierpinski's triangle. This is a parabola, and this is Rule 30. The waves in reverse, so they look more like foam from the sea. Right. Well, that's a good opportunity to show strong interrupt. By the way, any strong interrupt doesn't have a default shortcut, but you can assign one to it from here. From the preferences, you go to shortcuts. You can search for things like strong, and I've already added a shortcut, but just for the sake of demo, I'll add it again. And after we interrupted, we probably have an SI stack. Yeah. And I really hate having to type this reset to clear the stack. In old versions of the Windows IDE, in the Windows IDE, there is something called PF keys, which means you can program the F keys, F1 to F12, to correspond to actions as if typed by the user. So this is one of the features that have been requested quite a lot in RIDE. So I'm working on implementing this. I'm kind of in the middle. But I can show you what I've got now. And here, under shortcuts, I've added these fields in which you can type stuff. So if I type reset here, and in angle brackets, I can type the names of commands like ER for enter. So this means when I press F2, this will be equivalent to typing reset and pressing enter. And here I am pressing F2. This is not quite programmable. I mean, you have to set it to something static. Right. We are going to open source this thing. And I hasten to say that, I hasten to correct myself. It's free open source software. It's not just open source. It's not about the availability of the source. It's also about freedom. Legally, the way it works is just having access to something doesn't give you the opportunity to modify it and create derivative works. That's why the community of enthusiasts have come up with these licenses, like they've done the legal work required to make this possible within the framework of intellectual property we live in. And there are many reasons to open source RIDE. My personal favorite reason is why not? Why should we hide the source? There are reasons to not reveal the code of the interpreter, because it's our core business, but RIDE is like a sideline tool. It's also something that users would like to customize a lot because they interact directly with it. yeah, so we've decided to, well, management have decided to use the MIT license. There are like two branches in the open source stroke free software movement. There are two basic types of licenses. One is licenses like the GPL, which are share alike. That means that if you create derivative work and you publish it, then it has to be under the same license. While the other camp is the permissive, so-called permissive licenses, like the MIT license, the BSD license, and a few others, but these are the most popular ones, which are basically a little more than, I mean, there's little difference with public domain. Basically, you can do anything. You can create derivative work, you can even try to sell it, although I don't know how you will find people to buy it, given it's available to everyone. Yeah, so we're going with that, and I've prepared a commit in the right project, which is, today I published the source code, so now if you look at GitHub, the source is there. Yep, this is publicly available, and I've prepared a commit which puts a license file there and legally makes it open source, stroke free. If I go here and I say git push, and when I press enter, it will be legally open source. So it says rejected for a different branch. I mean, the master branch is okay. How are we doing for time?
We have 11 minutes left.
Shall I play the video now?
Yes, I mean, maybe you or I should say a couple of words about what the video is about.
Okay.
Do you want to, or?
Okay, maybe I should say a few words about the protocol first. The way RIDE works is it connects with the interpreter over TCP, and it sends JSON messages back and forth. We have a document roughly describing what the messages are. It may contain mistakes, but it is mostly the document we are working with. That's part of what we just published. And in order to test whether it's feasible to create alternative RIDE clients, we've asked a person from Ukraine to try and create a RIDE client for Eclipse. And I think he's done a fantastic job so far of that. And he's prepared a video demonstrating his work. And that's what I'm going to play now.
That's Eclipse application with EPL plugin. For beginning, first create new project. Next, add new file with function. Now project ready for launch. Let's start it. Open a new session. Function from project already loaded into workspace. If during runtime change project content, it renew workspace. For example, let's create new function. and change content for another. After saving, let's verify workspace content. In editor view, we can toggle line breakpoint, and in breakpoint view, we can browse all installed breakpoints and disable any. Let's start debugging. In debug view, show load session, suspended threads, and stack frames. Variable view used for short textual representation of variables values. Let's make few steps. After each step, variable view updates. From Eclipse we can connect to remote session. For example, let's launch new session, set connection settings, and create some function. In Eclipse, from configuration dialog, create new launch. Let it be remote. Choose project. In interpreter tab, select connection and launch. In debug view appeared new session. In console view created console for new session. Now we can continue working with both sessions. Using Workspace Explorer, we could browse content for each session. For functions which isn't part of Eclipse's project, use another title icon.
Right. And very quickly, just before Morten continues, I would like to show something that our very own Dan did, which is another RIDE client. If I find it in this list of terminals, should be running somewhere there. Oh, this is the APO interpreter corresponding to that thing. So, yep, this is Dan's thing. It is connected to the interpreter. The connection was created by this line. So new instance of RIDE client, then port number, and you can execute expressions like 2 + 2, and it gives the, oops. Well, it's probably not connected anymore because my laptop was suspended. Okay. Yeah, but you have to trust me with that. It returns the correct answer, 4. So over to Morten.
The PowerPoint. So that Eclipse project is, not something we expect you to all go off and use, but it's a very exciting project. I mean, the first proof of the value of opening up the RIDE protocol. So we funded that work also as an experiment to sort of really allow somebody who was coming from a very different environment, used to Eclipse, have a go at creating a front end to APL. So it's a very different view of how you would work with APL, everything, every function corresponding to a file and so on. So that's quite thought-provoking and useful for us. And it's also something we wanted to allow Alex, who did the work, to get most of the way through that before we published the protocol. I don't have time to list the functionality of the protocol, sorry, of the Eclipse plugin, but I think you saw a lot of it there. And that's going to remain an open source project that we sort of funded the beginning of. We haven't decided yet what we're going to do with it after that. Maybe some people will start using it. Maybe some people will enhance it. Maybe we'll decide that we want to contribute to it. This is another RIDE protocol-based application. This is actually based on the RIDE 2 protocol that we decided to let Stefano have some documentation for, I guess about 6 months ago, because he needed to monitor. They have a server farm where they have a lot of APL-based services. So all those blue boxes there are servers that are somehow part of the Sophia application. And they needed a console, sort of from which they could manage these things. So he's clicked on the detail tab here, so all those boxes are now down the left-hand side, and he's clicked on a particular one of these servers and can see the session log there. So the operator can click through all these things, browse, have a look at them, and here's another view where some of them actually failed. So some of them are suspended, and then they've then turned red. And after the operator has then clicked on it and looked at the view, he can right-click and say, well, I'd like to launch an actual RIDE session to connect to that one. So this window that's popped up here is a RIDE, I guess, 2.0. So there's a third application of, we have plans still to produce something that we call a process manager, which will eventually provide this sort of protocol. But since the RIDE added the functionality to launch remote processes using SSH, the urgency of that has dropped a bit, so we haven't prioritized that yet. But I don't think this took Stefano a terribly long time to produce. Maybe he'll be willing to share the code. Yes. Yeah, that would be great. So a mini process manager is already there. And with 2 minutes to go, I'm just going to put up, I think there are 2 slides here, with the kind of things that might go into RIDE 4.0, depending on your prioritization. How many people have actually used RIDE now or using it? So how many people have tried it just casually? And how many people are using it in anger? Right, okay, so not a very large number of people, but I think, again, this is one of those technologies which is really taking off. So obviously, upwards compatibility, we're making a version for the Raspberry Pi, which you currently you could use it with RIDE, but you had to run RIDE on Windows. I would hope that, let's do these in order. It'll become the default IDE for Linux as well as Mac OS, which it has been for version 15. We're working on what we call the zero footprint version, which is a very bad name for something that requires a web browser which is several hundred megabytes in size to use. But that's what they call it. You don't need to install it. So basically you start APL with a flag that says, please act as a mini web server. And then you can point a browser at it and it'll serve up all the JavaScript and so on that defines RIDE, and you can start running without installing anything. There's going to be an option to create an SSH tunnel to connect to a machine where APL is already running, but not necessarily launch a process. Just establish your credentials and connect you securely to the machine and use it. I don't know how many people have encountered this first problem here, or recognize the problem. Brian has. Indentical, that's an intentional typo. Because the RIDE and the ODE indent code, when they format the code, they indent it slightly differently, and there's other very small differences. And I feel this is a serious problem for people using source code management systems, because it introduces trivial little changes. So if you're working on the same project, and sometimes you connect with RIDE, sometimes you connect with the ODE. So, critical problem? Yeah. Okay, I kind of thought so. And then there's a few other things which are sort of just basically filling in functionality that's in ODE and not in RIDE. The intention is that within another release cycle or two, the ride will really be an environment where you don't feel you're missing anything compared to the ODE. There's still pieces missing today, but I think people have quite successfully been using it. And maybe we'll need a version on Android. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. I've overused my time. I was going to ask you to vote on what kind of layout you use, but maybe you can just think about that. Do you use floating windows when you're editing lots of functions, or do you like docking, or do you like the kind of golden layout, which I think is called, which is in the ride now? It's a bit like docking, but slightly different. Think about that and talk to us in the coffee breaks. Maybe we'll do a doodle poll or something. Right, so we're over. We're into Andy's time. Where's Andy? Yeah. Sorry? Oh, we should say thank you to Adrian Smith, yes, for allowing us to include the APL 385 font in that in the open sourcing. Okay, so I think I'll stand aside and let Andy do a fireside chat.